Good evening. It's a great pleasure to be here in Grenoble, and I know it's the end of the day, so you might be feeling tired. So I thought I would share with you maybe some stories to keep you alive a bit. So let me begin with one story. It's about a very bright student in Japan who comes to see a Zen master and tells him with a lot of excitement and pride, "Master, I traveled all around the world and have studied every religion possible. I master now all philosophies. The only thing I don't know about is Zen. Teach me everything I need to know about Zen so I can become an expert and a master like yourself." The master doesn't respond. Instead, he puts an empty teacup in front of the student and starts pouring tea. It doesn't stop. It keeps on pouring. And soon, the teacup fills up, and the tea starts spilling over on the table. The student, of course, gets very upset. And he yells at the master, "Master, stop. You can't pour any more tea into it. It's full." The master finally smiles, stops pouring tea, looks at the student, and tells him, "Like this cup, your mind is also full. How can I teach you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" Throughout today, you learned about different techniques and tools you can use to learn faster and better. But as the Zen master explains, you can't learn better or faster unless you empty your cup, that is, you unlearn what you already know. So what I want to talk about today is how you learn to unlearn. Let's begin with my own experience of the last 18 years, the way I learned to unlearn. I finished my studies in '95 in France in information systems, and then I went to an internship at IBM in Canada. I was in a large software development team. IBM had all the resources I wanted, and I was very excited to learn everything I could about information technology or IT. Soon I felt like I was an expert, like the Superman, we saw before in information technology, to the point where I told myself I'm going to become an IT consultant, and an independent IT consultant, and this was '96. And I applied for a job in Thailand in a government agency to become an IT consultant. The first day I showed up at work, I asked someone there, "Can I get an email address?" And they look at me, they say, "What is an email?" So then I told myself, I'm in trouble. Because I realized I wasn't there to use my expertise to help improve the existing IT system, but actually built it from scratch. So that was quite a humbling moment. I had to let go of my expert mindset and actually start with the basics. I rolled up my sleeves, and with very limited resources, I ended up building the whole IT infrastructure for the company. I built the email server, the intranet system, the public websites, etc., and I became very good at that. At one point, the intranet system I built even won an international award. So I felt very, very proud. And then in 1999, I came to the US. I became an analyst at Forrester Research, which is a market research firm, and I have to learn how to do research, write reports, and consult clients on how to change the business using technology. I knew a bit about technology, but not much about business. So again, I have to go back to the basics and learn how different industries operate. And eventually, I became very good at being an analyst. I won many awards. I was quoted extensively in the media as an expert, and the clients loved me. I felt like the superstar again. And then I wanted to challenge myself. So I went to England a couple of years ago to launch as an executive director a new research center at Cambridge University at the Judge Business School. I never worked in the academic sector before, so it was a very challenging job for me because I had to realize that I was not there to showcase my own expertise as much as connect and collaborate with other smart people inside and outside the campus and co-create new knowledge. But eventually, I learned to do it. As a matter of fact, the job was really challenging, but I learned very valuable skills like how to build partnerships and ecosystems. And then a few years ago, I finally returned to US to fulfill my childhood dream, which is write books. The problem is, I never wrote books before. So I have to essentially realize that everything I learned as a consultant, as an analyst, and then as a research director were not useful in terms of writing books. So I have to go back to the basics again. and learn the basics about writing books. And I have to say, it's a very challenging thing because I used up all my savings for the last 3 years to support myself financially to write these books. But eventually, I got very good at it, and the 2 books became bestsellers, which I'm very happy about. But even this week, even today, I have to unlearn something. For the past 18 years, I always was wearing a suit and a tie when I did presentations. And I told myself, it's time to loosen up a bit. I said, I need to wear jeans for the first time in my life. So 3 hours before my flight took off on Wednesday, I took my bike, rushed to the local retail store, and I got these jeans. So I kind of feel right now like the Superman without his costume and stripped of his powers. So bear with me. So what I want to talk about, again, is the importance of learning. So if you look at my own professional career over the last 18 years, as I navigated across different industries and different regions of the world, what happens is that the context kept changing. So everything I learned and was useful in one context became less useful as I shifted in other contexts. So the key word, again, is context. Whenever the context around you changes, you need to unlearn, let go of the old best practices. The bad news is that the business context, especially if you're a professional, is now rapidly changing because of major shifts. Things like the rise of India and China, or it could be the depletion of natural resources, the aging population, especially in Europe, and the explosion of technologies like social media and mobile phones. So if you are a professional, let's say an engineer or a marketing exec, or you might even be a business exec, all the tools and techniques you learned in the last 15, 20 years, I would say, are going to be less useful in the next 15, 20 years. But here's the good news. If you know how to adapt to this new reality of the 20th century, you can actually be very successful. But for that, you need to unlearn the old business paradigms of the 20th century, especially around 2 areas. One is innovation, and the second one is leadership. Let's start with innovation. If you're an engineer or a marketing professional, you are used to the traditional innovation model that I call more for more. That is, you keep spending more money in R&D to create more complex products that cost more money to the customers, right? But this model I call more for more is no longer viable in today's world simply because the resources are getting scarce and the consumers are becoming cost conscious and they're looking for products that are simpler and more affordable. So you need to unlearn this more for more innovation model and adopt what I call a frugal innovation model, a model that helps you create products that deliver more value to customers at less cost. One company, and this is a very old company, that's why I picked them up as an example, that actually successfully unlearned the old innovation paradigm and learned frugal innovation is the French car maker Renault. For over 100 years, Renault's engineers were damn good, very good, at creating very, very beautiful cars that have very superior technology quality. And they, of course, they also patented these inventions, and they were celebrated for these technology inventions. But in the late 90s, then CEO Louis Schweitzer went to Russia and discovered that the locally made car, Lada, was outselling Renault's premium cars. And you said, how come? Because the Lada looked terrible. I mean, it has a very poor design, for those of you know, especially from the spy movies you might have watched. And yet, it had some advantages. It was extremely robust in the extreme weather conditions of Russia. It was easy to maintain. You can do the kind of Fab Lab stuff. You can come up with your own spare parts to fix them. And it cost only 6,000 euros. But the Renault cars cost twice more. But not only that, they were not very dependable in the harsh weather of Russia. And the spare parts were not easy to find. So there was a very important moment there, because for the Renault engineers, they realized that the context has shifted. Because in emerging markets like Russia, what users are looking for are not sophisticated solutions. They are looking for simpler products and services that deliver more value at less cost. So that shift in perspective got them thinking and unlearn decades of expertise they had in building complex and sophisticated cars, and learn to design simpler cars that are at the same time dependable and good-looking and affordable. It wasn't easy, but they learned how to empty the cup. As a matter of fact, in 2005, Renault launched the famous Logan, which is a 5,000 euro car, a no-frills sedan, actually, which is good-looking, decent-looking, and yet is dependable and reliable. So Renault is a company that learned how to unlearn the old innovation paradigm in order to succeed in the 21st century. And I'm sure because of that, they will be around for the next 100 years as well. So innovation is the first thing. The second thing you have to unlearn is the old leadership paradigm, which I call the smart leadership, which I wrote in my second book. Smart leaders believe that knowledge is power, so they don't like to collaborate and openly share information. They also believe in efficiency, so they like to control things and make things more predictable. But neither beliefs are credible or realistic today, and they are not valid anymore because, first of all, with the explosion of social media and internet, knowledge is no longer power. Finding and sharing knowledge is what gives you power. Second thing is, in today's chaotic environment, it doesn't matter how efficient you are. What matters is how flexible and how adaptable you are. So you need to unlearn the old smart leadership model and adopt what I call a wise leadership model that allows you to build new capabilities like openness and empathy. One company where managers had to unlearn the smart leadership model and embrace the wise leadership model is IBM, another 100-year-old company. In the late 90s, IBM was struggling to adapt to the new reality of the internet. Their managers were very good at running large, profitable business units that were selling PCs and hardware, like mainframe technology. But the clients were not looking for that. What they wanted now is end-to-end business solutions that use the internet to connect the IT systems with their customers and suppliers. So IBM managers at that time were confused about how to adapt to the new reality. So then CEO Lou Gerstner came up with a bright idea. In 2000, he set up what's called Emerging Business Opportunities, or EBOs. These were small business units set up to be nimble enough to quickly capture new market opportunities, especially around the internet. And he did something very wise. He took the most experienced managers of IBM, the kingmakers, the rainmakers, and then he put them in charge of the EBOs, and he told them, you're getting a promotion. But for the managers, it felt like a demotion. These are the guys running multi-billion-dollar businesses, and overnight, they were running startups with no revenue. But they have to unlearn and let go of the old paradigm leadership and learn how to think and act as a nimble entrepreneur. It was a big cup they have to empty, but they did. Successfully, as a matter of fact, in the last 15 years, and I've worked with them in the past, I can tell you that thanks to the EBOs, now IBM is on a better footing because a lot of technologies around smart cities and Internet of Things actually emanated from the EBOs that were incubated in the early 2000 period. So clearly, it's important to unlearn the old innovation leadership paradigms. The question is how you go about unlearning your own best practices, right? Well, first of all, for that, we need to look at what's in your cup. So what happens is that over time, as you evolve in your professional career, what happens is that you end up accumulating a lot of knowledge, and you end up becoming very good at what you do. And soon, you don't even know, essentially, when you end up doing what you do, you don't really know how it happens what you do. So the principles behind it become part of the tacit knowledge. And very soon, however, what happens is that you don't even recall why you're doing what you do, which is what is the kind of beliefs and assumptions that subconsciously drive your actions and decisions. So in my book, From Smart to Wise, I explained that unlearning is really about challenging and changing not only what you do, which is your practices, but also, more importantly, how you do things, and then finally, why you do things, which is your perspectives. And that's what happened in the case of Renault's engineers, right? Because they had to fundamentally shift the perspective, or had the perspective shifted through the experience in Russia. And that led them, in a way, to change the old design principles and adopt the frugal design principles, which they then applied and practiced to create the Logan. Same thing happened in the case of IBM. Because if they only emptied the top of the cup, that wasn't enough. They had to empty the whole cup and change the perspective as well, which then led to new leadership principles, and then they apply them in the day-to-day work. So the question is, how do you empty your whole cup? In particular, how do you change your perspective? Well, the way you change your perspective, as I explained in my own career, is when you expose yourself. You have to get out of your comfort zone and expose yourself in a new context that challenges your perspective. So in conclusion, I would say, let me give you some examples. Let's say you are a management consultant or investment banker. I would say spend some time in the nonprofit sector. I can guarantee you that it will challenge your assumptions around profit maximization and shareholder return and shift and broaden your perspective. If you're an engineer working in the US or Europe, I would say you got to go spend some time working in emerging markets like Africa, India, or China, where you will learn how to innovate under severe constraints with limited resources. That will, again, broaden your perspective. And then finally, if you are a business leader or executive, I really encourage you to take on challenging new projects that will challenge your smart leadership style and encourage you to develop wise leadership capabilities like empathy, and we heard earlier, mindfulness as well. So in closing, I would like to quote this amazing Zen master, Suzuki Roshi, who beautifully said that in the beginner's mind, there are a few possibilities, and the expert's mind, there are a few. Thank you very much.